Hello, Reading Room. How are you? We are here continuing on with our book, Ethics for the New Millennium. It is day number 152 in the classroom. We are here on September 26th. Who cares what year it is? We're over here in 2000 over here. So whatever. Whatever, because the books we read are timeless. Shall we have a little bit more serious note when we get started? Don't forget we were going by chapters, but then chapter 6 kind of got long. Oh, I was on this one. That's the reason why. There we go. Okay. So, finishing up chapter 6 in our book, Ethics for a New Millennium. The afflictive emotions also have an irrational dimension. They encourage us to suppose that appearances are invariably commensurate with reality. When we become angry or feel hatred, we tend to relate to others as if their characteristics were immutable. A person can appear to be objectionable from the crown on their head to the soles of their feet. We forget that they, like us, are merely suffering human beings with the same wish to be happy and to avoid suffering as we ourselves. Yet common sense alone tells us that when the force of our anger diminishes, they are sure to seem a little better at least. The same is true in reverse. When individuals become infatuated, the other appears to be wholly desirable until such time as the grip of afflictive emotion subsides and they come to seem a little less than perfect. Indeed, when our passions become so strongly aroused, there is a considerable danger of going to the opposite extreme. The individual once idolized now seems despicable and hateful, though, of course, it is the same person throughout. The afflictive emotions are also useless. The more we give in to them, the less room we have for our good qualities, for kindness and compassion, and the less we are able to solve our problems. Indeed, there is no occasion when these disturbing thoughts and emotions are helpful either to ourselves or to others. The more angry we are, the more people shun us. The more suspicious we are, the more cut off from people we become, and thus the more lonely. The more lustful we are, the less we are able to develop proper relationships with others. And again, the more lonely we become. Consider the individual whose activities are directed principally by afflictive emotions, or, to put it another way, by gross attachments and diversions, by greed, arrogant ambition, and so forth. Such a person may become very powerful and very famous. Their name may even go down in history, but after they die, their power is gone and their fame is no more than an empty word. So what have they really achieved? Nowhere is the uselessness of afflictive emotion more obvious than in the case of anger. When we become angry, we stop being compassionate, loving, generous, forgiving, tolerant, and patient altogether. We thus deprive ourselves of the very things that happiness consists in. And not only does anger immediately destroy our critical faculties, it tends toward rage, spite, hatred, and malice, each of which is always negative because it is a direct cause of harm for others. Anger causes suffering. At the very least, it causes the pain of embarrassment. For example, I have always enjoyed repairing watches, but I can recall a number of occasions as a boy when, completely losing my patience with those tiny, intricate parts, I picked up the mechanism and smashed it down on the table. Of course, later, I felt very sorry and ashamed of my behavior, especially when, as on one occasion, I had to return the watch to its owner in a condition worse than it was before. This story, trivial in itself, also makes the point that though we may have an abundance of material wealth, good food, fine furnishings, a nice television set. When we become angry, we lose all inner peace. We no longer enjoy even our breakfast. And when it becomes habitual, we may be ever so learned, rich, or powerful, but others will simply avoid us. They will say, oh, yes, he is very clever, but he has such bad moods, and people will keep away. Or they will say, yes, she is extraordinarily talented, but she gets upset so easily. You had better watch out. Just as when a dog is always growling and showing its teeth, we are cautious of those whose hearts are disturbed by anger. We would rather forego their company than risk an outburst. I do not deny that, as in the case of fear, there is a kind of raw anger that we experience more as a rush of energy than as a cognitively enhanced emotion. Conceivably, this form of anger could have positive consequences. It is not impossible to imagine anger at the sight of injustice causing someone to act altruistically. The anger that causes us to go to the assistance of someone who is being attacked in the street could be characterized as positive. But if this goes beyond meeting the injustice, if it becomes personal and turns into vengefulness or maliciousness, then danger arises. When we do something negative, we are capable of recognizing the difference between ourselves and the negative act, but we often fail to separate actions and agent when it comes to others. This shows us how unreliable is even apparently justified anger. Should it still too much say that anger is an entirely useless emotion, we can ask ourselves if anyone ever says anger can bring happiness. No one does. What doctor prescribes anger as a treatment for any disease? There isn't one. Anger can only hurt us. It has nothing to recommend it. Let the reader ask himself or herself, when we become angry, do we feel happy? Does our mind become calmer and our body relax? Or rather, is it not that we feel tense in body and unsettled of mind? We do prescribe, in some ways, in psychology, anger as a treatment. And I'm not saying it's good, it's a good treatment, but I do say we have thought of it as cathartic, right? So get your anger out this way or that way. So it's interesting. No, it hurts us. Okay, if we are to retain our peace of mind and thereby our happiness, it follows that alongside a more rational and disinterested approach to our negative thoughts and emotions, we must cultivate a strong habit of restraint in response to them. Negative thoughts and emotions are what cause us to act unethically. Furthermore, because afflictive emotion is also the source of our own internal suffering, in that it is the basis of frustration, confusion, insecurity, anxiety, and the very loss of self-respect, which undermines our sense of confidence. Failure to do so means that we will remain in a state of perpetual mental and emotional discomfort. Inner peace will be impossible. In place of happiness, there will be insecurity. Anxiety and depression will never be far away. Some people feel that although it may be right to curb those feelings of intense hatred, which can cause us to be violent and even kill, we are in danger of losing our independence when we restrain our emotion and discipline the mind. Actually, the opposite is true. Like their counterparts of love and compassion, anger and the afflictive emotion can never be used up. They have rather a propensity to increase, like a river flooding in summer when the snow melts, so that far from being free, our minds are enslaved and rendered helpless by them. When we indulge our negative thoughts and feelings, inevitably, we become accustomed to them. I taught that today in Early Birds, actually. As a result, gradually we become more prone to them and in engaging and more controlled by them. And we become habituated to exploding in the face of displeasing circumstances. Inner peace, which is the principal characteristic of happiness, and anger cannot coexist without undermining one another. Indeed, negative thoughts and emotions undermine the very causes of peace and happiness. In fact, when we think properly, it is totally illogical to seek happiness if we do nothing to restrain angry, spiteful, and malicious thoughts and emotions. Consider that when we become angry, we often use harsh words. Harsh words can destroy friendship. A friend can destroy friendship. Since happiness arises in the context of our relationships with others, if we destroy friendships, we undermine one of the very conditions of happiness itself, such as anger, out of a feeling that they need to present a facade of control, of self-control, or out of fear of what others may think. Such behavior is like closing a wound which is still infected. We are not talking about rule following. Where denial and suppression occur, there comes the danger that in so doing, the individual stores up anger and resentment. The trouble here is that at some future point, they may find they cannot contain these feelings any longer. In other words, there are, of course, thoughts and emotions which it is appropriate, even important, to express openly, including negative ones, albeit there are more or less appropriate ways to do so. It is far better to confront a person or situation than to hide our anger away, brood on it, and nurture resentment in our hearts. Yet if we indiscriminately express negative thoughts and emotions simply on the grounds that they must be articulated, there is a strong possibility, for all the reasons I have given, that we will lose control and overreact. Thus, the important thing is to be discriminating, both in terms of the feelings we express and in how we express them. As I understand it, genuine happiness is characterized by inner peace and arises in the context of our relationships with others. It therefore depends on ethical conduct. This in turn consists in acts which take others' well-being into account. What obstructs us from engaging in such compassionate conduct is afflictive emotion. If then we wish to be happy, we need to curb our response to negative thoughts and emotions. This is what I mean when I say that we must tame the wild elephant that is the undisciplined mind. When I fail to restrain my response to afflictive emotions, my actions become unethical and obstruct the cause of my happiness. We're not talking about obtaining Buddhahood here. We are not talking about achieving union with God. We are merely recognizing that my interest and future happiness are closely connected to others and learning to act accordingly. Chapter 7, the ethic of virtue. I have suggested that if we are to be genuinely happy, inner restraint is indispensable. We cannot stop at restraint, however. Though it may prevent us from performing any grossly negative misdeeds, mere restraint is insufficient if we are to attain that happiness which is characterized by inner peace. In order to transform ourselves, our habits and dispositions, so that our actions are compassionate, it is necessary to develop what we might call an ethic of virtue. As well as refraining from negative thoughts and emotions, we need to cultivate and reinforce our positive qualities. What are these positive qualities? Our basic human or spiritual qualities. Positive qualities, our basic human or spiritual qualities. So this is an interesting perspective, that our very nature is holy, is what this perspective is. So psychologists, are we born good and behave badly? Are we born bad and behave goodly? So, what are these positive qualities? Our basic human nature or spiritual qualities. After compassion, Nyingye itself, the chief of these is what the Tibetan we call Sopa. Once again, we have a term which appears to have no ready equivalent in other languages, though the idea it conveys are universal. The ideas it conveys are universal. Often, Sopa is translated simply as patience, though its literal meaning is able to bear or able to withstand. But the word also carries a notion of resolution. It thus denotes a deliberate response as opposed to an unreasoned reaction to the strong negative thoughts and emotions that tend to arise when we encounter harm. As such, sopa is what provides us with the strength to resist suffering and protects us from losing compassion, even for those who would harm us. In this context, I am reminded of the example of Lopan a monk from Namgyal Monastery. Following my escape from Tibet, Lopan La was one of many thousands of monks and officials imprisoned by the occupying forces. When he was finally released, he was allowed to come to India, where he rejoined his old monastery, now refounded in exile. More than 20 years after last seeing him, I found Lopan La much as I remembered him. He looked older, of course, but physically he was unscathed, and mentally his ordeal had not affected him adversely at all. His gentleness and serenity remained. From our conversation, I learned that he had nevertheless endured grievous treatment during those long years of imprisonment. In common with all others, he had been subjected to re-education, during which he had been forced to denounce his religion, and on many occasions he was tortured as well. When I asked him whether he had ever been afraid, he admitted that there was one thing that had scared him: the possibility that he might lose compassion and concern for his jailers. I was very moved by this and also very inspired. Hearing Lopan La's story confirmed what I had always believed. It is not just a person's physical constitution, nor their intelligence, nor their education, nor even their social conditioning, which enables them to withstand hardship. Much more significant is their spiritual state. And while some may be able to survive through sheer willpower, the ones who suffer the least are those who attain a high level of sopa. Okay. Forbearance and also fortitude, courage in the face of adversity, are two words which come quite close to describing sopa at its first level. But when a person develops it more, there comes composure in adversity, a sense of being unperturbed, reflecting a voluntary acceptance of hardship in pursuit of a higher spiritual aim. This involves accepting the reality of a given situation through recognizing that underlying its particularity, there is a vastly complex web of interrelated causes and conditions. Sopa is thus the means by which we practice true nonviolence. It is what enables us not only to refrain from physical reactions when we are provoked, but it enables us to let go of our negative thoughts and emotions too. We cannot speak of sopa when we give in to someone, yet we do so grudgingly or resentfully. If, for example, a superior in the workplace upsets us, yet we are obliged to defer to them despite our feelings, that is not sopa. The essence of sopa, resolute forbearance in the face of adversity. The essence of sopa is resolute forbearance in the face of adversity. In other words, the one who practices patient forbearance is determined not to give up, to give in to negative impulses, which are experienced as afflictive emotion in the form of anger, hatred, desire for revenge, and so on. But rather counters their sense of injury and does not return harm for harm. None of the foregoing is meant to impress that there are not times when it is appropriate to respond to others with strong measures, nor does practicing patience in the sense I have described it mean that we must accept whatever people would do to us and simply give in, nor does it mean that we should never act at all when we meet with harm. Sopa should not be confused with mere thoughts and emotions. From this, we see that it is the very opposite of cowardice. Cowardice arises when we lose all confidence as a result of fear. Patient forbearance means that we remain firm even if we are afraid. Nor when I speak of acceptance do I mean that we should not do everything in our power to solve our problems whenever they can be solved. But in the case of present suffering, that which we are already undergoing, acceptance can help ensure that the experience is not compounded by the additional burden of mental and emotional suffering. For example, there is nothing much we can do about old age. Far better to accept our condition than to fret about it. Indeed, it always strikes me as a bit foolish when elderly people proudly turn away when obviously they need it. Patient forbearance, then, is the quality which enables us to prevent negative thoughts and emotions from taking hold of us. It safeguards our peace of mind in the face of adversity. Through practicing patience in this way, our conduct is rendered ethically wholesome. As we have seen, the first step in ethical practice is to check our response to negative thoughts and emotions as they arise. The next step, what we do after applying the brakes, is to counter that provocation with patience. Here the reader may object that surely there will be occasion when this is impossible. What about the times when someone we are close to, who knows all our weaknesses, behaves towards us in a way that we find ourselves unable to prevent anger from completely overwhelming our defenses? Under such circumstances, we may indeed find it impossible to preserve our compassion for the other, but at least we should take care not to react violently or aggressively. Leaving the room and going for a walk, or even counting 20 breaths, may be the best thing. We need to find some means of calming down a bit. This is why we need to put the practice of patience at the heart of our daily lives. It is a question of familiarizing ourselves with it at the deeper level, so that when we do find ourselves in a difficult situation, although we may have to make an extra effort, we know what is involved. On the other hand, if we ignore the practice of patience until we are actually experiencing trouble, it is quite likely that we will not succeed in resisting provocation. One of the best ways to begin familiarizing ourselves with the virtue of patience, or sopa, is by taking time to reflect systematically on its benefits. Let's see here. Okay. It is a source of forgiveness. When sopa is combined with our ability to discriminate between action and anger, forgiveness arises naturally. Moreover, sopa has no equal in protecting our concern for others, whatever their behavior toward us. It enables us to reserve our judgment toward the act, and it enables us to have compassion for the individual. Similarly, when we develop the ability patiently to forbear, we find that we develop a proportionate reserve of calmness and tranquility. We tend to be less antagonistic and more pleasant to associate with. This in turn creates a positive atmosphere around us, so that it is easy for others to relate to us. And being better grounded emotionally through the patience of patience, we find that not only do we become much stronger mentally and spiritually, but we tend also to be healthier physically. Certainly, I attribute the good health I enjoy to a generally calm and peaceful mind. But the most important benefit of sopa, or patience, consists in the way it acts as a powerful antidote to the affliction of anger, the greatest threat to our inner peace and therefore our happiness. Indeed, we find that patience is the best means we have of defending ourselves internally from anger's destructive effects. This is probably where I started praying for patience, right here. Consider riches are no defense against anger, nor is a person's education, no matter how accomplished and intelligent they may be, nor for that matter can the law be of any help, and fame is useless. Only the inner protection of patience forbearance can keep us from experiencing the turmoil of negative thoughts and emotions. The mind or spirit, is not physical. It cannot be touched or harmed directly. Only negative thoughts and emotions can harm it. Therefore, only the corresponding positive quality can protect it. Okay, that's where we're going to stop in chapter 7. We might get back on chapters. I don't know. It depends on how long these chapters are. We are all set for this week. We're going to come back to the classroom on October 1st. So fall, I would have to say, is officially here. Thanks for joining me here in the reading room where we are reading The Ethics for a New Millennium by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I will see you back here on Tuesday after our 4 days off. We're back with 3 days on. Thanks for joining me.